that will lead into our presentation for the night with Mitch Rohse, who has done a lot of supporting birding in the Pacific Northwest and also abroad. Now, Mitch grew up in the then small town of McMinnville, Oregon. His parents were very active people who traveled constantly and loved the outdoors. The families hiked, camped, boated, fished, hunted, and vacationed in the great parks of the Western United States. Mitch carried on his parents' love of travel and the outdoors. He was a Peace Corps volunteer in Borneo in the mid-60s. He was a weather observer for the Air Force in Texas and Vietnam. And he was a graduate teaching assistant in Hawaii. Not only that, but he and his wife once backpacked all around New Zealand, Australia, and Southeast Asia for 5 months. But he also had to support all this, of course. And in 1973, Mitch graduated from the University of Oregon with a master's degree in planning, and he took his first planning job in Lane County. In 1973, when he graduated, it happened to be a banner year for land use planning in Oregon, since that was the year that Oregon's legislature passed Tom McCall's Senate Bill 100, which created the statewide program for land use planning. Mitch worked with and for that program for almost 4 decades. He wrote a book about land use planning in Oregon. If you could guess, it was called Land Use Planning in Oregon, published by the Oregon State University Press in 1987. Mitch retired in 2010 and decided that the best way to get exercise, be outdoors, and appreciate Oregon's natural beauty would be to take up wildlife photography. He never does anything halfway. He bought a camera, studied photography, and started shooting photos. In spite of vigorous editing and weeding, he has about 100,000 outdoor pictures on his computer now. He goes out for several hours, 4 or 5 days each week, typically shooting 200 to 300 shots at Basket Slough Riverfront Park, Minto Brown, or Newport. Last year, Mitch and Louann took a trip that proved to be a wildlife photographer's dream. They went to Zambia and spent 3 weeks in remote safari camps in that nation's fabulous parks and wildlife reserves. Mitch took more than 8,000 photos and is here this evening to share the best of them with you. But let me remind the audience that there will be a question and answer afterwards, and you can submit your questions by typing in on the chat function as Mitch is speaking. Thank you. Mitch, it's all yours. Go with it, Mitch.
Oh, I'm just pushing those buttons, Eugenia. Here. I think we are ready to go. Thank you very much, Eugenia, and many thanks to Tim and Mike also for coaching me on the nuances of presenting a live show to birders tonight via Zoom rather than in person. I want to welcome all of those who are joining us on this smoky evening to go on an adventure in Zambia, and let's go ahead and go on a safari. 1 year ago, my wife Louann and I were fortunate enough to go on the trip of a lifetime to Zambia, and we visited 3 safari camps there, spent several days, up to actually 10 days at one of them. But 3 safari camps in Zambia's magnificent national park. And these are parks that are known all over the world to wildlife aficionados anyway, for the wonderful wild game and the wild habitat that's available there. And so every day for 3 weeks, we were able to look at sunrise scenes like this and go on safari twice each day. If you're like me, you probably are a little unsure of where Zambia is. I certainly was until we started planning this Africa trip a couple of years ago. And I've just done a little locator map here to show you where it is and some of the countries around it that you may be more familiar with. Zambia used to be known as Northern Rhodesia, and it was a British colony up until 1964 when it got its independence and assumed its present name. And Zambia is a pretty big country. It's 3 times the state of Oregon in size, and it's on a really big continent. When I was doing some research for this, I learned that the African continent is quite a bit bigger than the North American continent. Which surprised me. But fairly big country and a very big place. And we, as I said, we stayed at 3 safari camps there. They're shown in yellow here on this map of Zambia. Shumba was the first one. The name means lion. That's a very appropriate name, as it turns out. The second one, Musakese, is farther down in Kafue National Park, and it's on the Kafue River. And then finally, the 3rd camp we stayed at, the one where we stayed for 10 days, is Zakomo. And it's over in the eastern part of Zambia. And it's a fabulous place. World-class wildlife and birds everywhere you look. And I might say that Zambia has made a huge commitment to conservation of wildlife and to conservation of habitat also. About 1/4 of the country, a little more than 1/4 of the country, is in parks or reserves of some kind to protect wildlife and habitat. And they're really doing a good job of trying to encourage ecotourism and conservation. If you're going to travel in Zambia and you're a visitor to the rural areas there, you basically have 2 choices. There aren't many roads, so you're either going to fly by small aircraft, or you're going to travel overland in a 4-wheel drive vehicle. Once we got out on safari in these 3 camps, we didn't see paved roads very much at all. And if you're going to travel to Zambia to go on safari, you need to travel light. My wife and I did the whole month-long Zambia trip with carry-on luggage. We had a soft-sided bag that we stuck up in the overhead bins, and then we both had a smaller bag that we stuck under the seat in front of us. My bag contained 10 pounds of camera gear. And the small aircraft fly internally in Zambia simply cannot handle large bags, hard-sided luggage with wheels. So you just have to travel light. And this is the Lefupa airstrip. I almost titled it the Lefupa International Airport facetiously, but anyway, it's a modest airstrip, which is near Kafue Park. We landed here and then took a Toyota Land Cruiser 4-wheel drive rig to get to our first camp. Those are the restroom facilities behind the tree there. And you can see the terminal over here on the left side of the picture. And one of those vehicles was waiting for us to take us to Shumba Camp. As you go overland, you're on tracks like this typically. These are passable in the summer and the dry season, not passable in the winter and the rainy season. And this was frankly probably the best road we saw in rural Zambia during our safaris. And of course, along the way, we started to see some wildlife as we drove toward Shumba Camp. It was about a half-hour drive, as I recall, and we started seeing antelope and some of the African landscape. And this is Shumba. We're driving up to our camp here, and Shumba means lion. And as you can see, that's an appropriate title for the camp. These two young fellows here look as if they're looking wistfully at that puku, the little antelope on the left of your screen there, thinking about lunch. You'll notice our quarters and all the buildings and the walkways in the camp are raised. They're on stilts 6 or 8 feet above the ground. And it's kind of encouraging when you see that, because you think, well, that's to keep the wild animals out. And believe me, 6 feet of elevation doesn't deter a lion at all. And the reason the buildings are on posts like that is mainly because in the rainy season, a lot of this area goes underwater. And so the posts do keep the quarters up off the ground and the dirt and perhaps some bugs and snakes, but they're mainly because of the moisture. And incidentally, speaking of snakes, we didn't see one in the entire time we were in Zambia. These are our quarters. For some reason, at the safari camps, the owners and managers always call the quarters chalets, which seems oddly Swiss to me, and I think of the Alps. But in any case, this was our chalet at Shumba, and a self-contained unit. Louann and I had very comfortable quarters here. The camps are entirely self-contained. They have solar power. They can generate a little bit of electricity, enough to charge your iPad and your camera battery charger. But they're totally self-contained, their own water supply. There are no urban amenities for many hours in any direction. These are in very rural and isolated, remote areas. There's our solar water heater, and that's also the view that we had from the front of our quarters, looking out across what are called Busanga Plains. It's a vast savanna north of Kafue National Park, filled with thousands of ungulates every day, antelope. These happen to be Cape buffalo that we're seeing by the hundreds here in the distance. These are our quarters, very comfortable. They are, all of the camps provided excellent and comfortable accommodations, and we even had hot showers. Now you have to bring hot water. One of the staff people has to bring hot water to the bungalow and then raise it up to an elevated reservoir. And then you can take a quick hot shower using that hot water. And they also have ensuite toilets, so you don't have to go out in the middle of the night amidst the lions if you're in need of a restroom. And our days typically began at about 5 a.m. Somebody from the staff would come knock on our door and then leave. They'd give us about 15 minutes to pack up the day bag and the camera gear that we had laid out the night before. About 5:15, the staffer would come back with a flashlight, guide us to the dining area. We'd have a very light breakfast, and we'd be in our safari vehicles by typically 5:45 or 6 o'clock. And we'd go out on a 3 or 4 hour safari in the morning, come home for the middle of the day and the big meal of the day. We take a nap and then go back out in the afternoon from about anywhere from 2 o'clock till 6 or on late evening. Sometimes we were on safari in the dark. As far as the camera gear goes, you don't need that great big zoom, except it would have been handy for the birds. But again, we were traveling light. So this is a 400 millimeter zoom, and that was plenty for most of the photography that I was doing. You'll notice that we got up pretty close to those lions in the 4-wheel drive rigs. The lions view the vehicle as some great big thing other than a bunch of animal objects, humans, and they don't see the vehicle as lunch, which of course we're quite thankful about. And we were advised by the guides, stand up, don't wave your arms, don't speak loudly about the things you're seeing, which is hard to do sometimes. but we were able to approach, in many cases, within 20 feet of lions like this big fella. And this was a pride of lions, I think about, probably half a dozen, maybe 8 or 10, near Shumbo Camp. This young fellow looks like he needs a nap. And this one, on the other hand, looks like he might be going hunting here. And this is one of my favorite pictures of the trip. I love the sort of wistful face of this young lion. I won't go into any elaborate explanations about this photo, probably self-explanatory. Leopards are quite common in Zambia, and certain parks we went to. However, they're pretty hard to see. You can see from the camouflage here of this one up in the tree. And in the daytime, they do tend to be up in the trees. They seek shade and they rest, and then they go out and do most of their hunting at night. But I'll show you some of our night shots later. Here we're back on the Busanga Plains, looking out toward Cape Buffalo and a couple of gray-crowned cranes with African buffalo in the background there. This is a wildebeest. That's the official name of the animal. I'm not describing it as being depressed. This is a secretary bird that happened to be along the route we were taking on our safari that day. These are kudu. There are two subspecies, the greater and the lesser. I don't know which of these two animals are. Generally, the lesser kudu tend to hang out more in the areas where there's cover and brush, and greater kudu tend to be out on the plains more. But we saw quite a few of these, and they truly are beautiful animals. Now, out here on the plains also, we saw a lot of zebras. These are Grant's zebras. That's my conclusion. I'm certainly not an expert on all the wildlife in Zambia or any of the wildlife in Zambia, but there are 7 subspecies. The Grant's zebra is identified by horizontal stripes on the rear flanks and by a very short mane. And incidentally, in the background here, you'll see these little these are called tree islands or islands in the plain, and this is on some of the larger islands. That's where the safari camps tend to be located. Those gray-crowned cranes again, very common bird. We saw a lot of these, often very near our camps. And speaking of the birds, let's move into those. Books that I looked at said there were somewhere between 790 and 850 species of birds in Zambia. And near as I can tell, for 3 weeks of safari, they're all stunning, they're all beautiful, they're all exciting. The wild lapwing is quite common, as is the white-crowned. A barbet, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, black-collared barbet, not often seen. I think that was the only one we saw and photographed on the trip. Brown parrot, which is an entirely new species to me for most of these birds. Greenwood hoopoe, and it looked to me as if he has a centipede in that snag. And the gray heron, the equivalent to our great blue heron. It's a little bit smaller, it tends to be near the water, just like our own great blues. And these were quite common around camp also. And here's kind of an unusual one. And I'm not entirely sure of the ID. I did as much research as I could on this and concluded that it was this golden beaver. And incidentally, if you really want to follow up on some of the details of bird life in Zambia, go to the Wikipedia entry for birds in Zambia. And they have a wonderful listing there that goes on and lists many hundreds of species, often with detailed explanations and some good photographs. This bird, incidentally, was about 50 or 100 feet from our camp at Zakomo. If you go to Africa, I can just about guarantee you're going to fall in love with elephants, or at least we certainly did. They're just such elegant and graceful creatures, and they move out with this great dignity because they're so well adapted to their environment, and they have a very tight family arrangement. Typically, you're going to see elephants in groups of 8 or 10, and they always work diligently to protect little guys like you see here from attack by predators, including, for example, lions. And there's usually 1 or 2 young bulls in the herd. They're kind of rowdy, and sometimes they'll get a little excited if they think the vehicle is coming too close, and they do these mock charges, and they just flare out their ears and they toss their head around and maybe kick up a little dust. We were never charged. And I should take a moment here to note that our guides were just, without exception, all very knowledgeable, very, very careful, not only to protect us, but also to protect the animals. They view the animals as the future of Zambia, and they want to make sure they don't threaten any of the animals just in the name of having a tourist get a picture. Elephants, for some reason, like to browse in acacia trees, and I just threw this photograph in to show you what the thorns on an acacia tree look like. And here's one of the little guys. They are always sort of sheepish looking and staying really close to mom. And these are 2 old timers that look like they've been walking around the savannah for many a decade. And I guess this is lunch. This is a typical Jeep track, Jeep trail in the rural areas of Zambia. Often, where I would say almost wherever we go, whenever we were driving, we were looking at wildlife of some kind. It would be more birds, of course, where we were around trees, and in more areas like this, we were seeing antelope and other ungulates. In the season, a lot of these areas fill up with water and become wet. And then the rainy season runs from December through April. And then at that time, the weather starts to get hotter, the rains cease through much of Zambia, and land starts to dry out. And as the areas of water diminish, then the concentration of animals around the water starts to get greater and greater. Here we're looking at a lot of open-billed storks, and I'm not sure whether the white herons are in the background, but this is a very typical scene around the lands. And incidentally, we were in Zambia in July and August. That was dry season, not particularly hot, got up into the mid-80s on a typical day. And then the really hot weather starts in late September, goes October, November, and then it rains pretty much from there on till April. A couple of wattled cranes, 3 wattled cranes, Mom and Pop and Junior, and the few birds that we saw often out in open areas far, far from water. Again, another common bird. And this was certainly a common bird. When we get in brushy or forested areas, we'd see a lot of the helmeted geefowl. And of course, they're quite striking. And they also are very popular prey for a lot of the big cats. These fellows are warthogs. Of course, we see them quite frequently in the brush, and they're a favorite target for the lions. And if I hadn't been so focused on wildlife, particularly birds, during much of my photography, I probably could have spent the entire 3 weeks researching and photographing trees in Africa. They're just magnificent. A lot of the large trees, fig trees, acacias, let's see, sausage trees, another big one, are just striking elements in the landscape. And after all, you're looking at the biggest land animals on earth here, and look how they're diminished by by that tree. This was our Frank at our second camp, Musikese camp. And it was not at all common to have elephants come out here in the morning and stroll the area. And we almost always had antelopes and a variety of birds out here. And again, the so to speak. Now we're on safari and we're in a very rustic area in what are truly camps, but that doesn't mean that we suffered too much when it came to mealtime. The meals were excellent. One of the camps, the service was great. The setting obviously is beautiful, al fresco. And we can sit here and have lunch or dinner and just watch wildlife go by. You can see a puku, a small antelope out there. A couple of times we had a lion go by at about the same range where that puku is in the background. Like this fella. He was a visitor to Musikese camp, and he and his mate decided that they would settle into the camp right by our quarters. This is our cottage at Musikese. And these two carried on quite a tryst for 2 days. And I learned about lion mating habits, probably more than I really wanted to learn. When the two of them get together, they have a romantic interlude of about 20 seconds, and they take a nap for 15 or 20 minutes, and then they have another romantic interlude. And this could go on for many, many, many hours, including through the night, we learned. And the first night we were very, very quiet because we frankly didn't want to have the lions know that there was anybody inside the cottage. But by the time the night was over, to shout out the window at them to go get a room or something. It really fouled up the camp staff. It meant that the visitors and the camp staff couldn't walk out the camp. And so we couldn't be led from our lodge, from our cottage here on foot to the dining area or central area to board our Land Rovers for safaris. So what they would do, what the staff would do, is bring a safari to our front, a Land Rover to our front porch. We would step directly into the Land Rover and thus be protected from the lion, and then drive to the dining area. And in one case, the lions occupied the dining area for several hours, and the staff actually had to take us out on what amounted to a picnic, set up tables and chairs under the shade of a big tree a half mile from camp, and serve us yet another fine meal. Staff's very good at adapting to this. This was a kill that was made, a killable warthog that was made near our camp at Musikese. The big male was willing to let the cubs and some of the other members of the pride come in and share in the kill, but he was very cranky. And we don't know what would set him off, but in the behavior of the cubs and the other lion. But he would get up, he'd cuff these cubs around, he'd roar at their lions if they got too close, and then he'd go back to eating. And the cubs would crawl on the ground on their belly and kind of work their way back to the kill and got more to eat. And finally, he just got tired of the bother, and he picked up the rest of the kill and wandered off to find a private place. And then, of course, retired to the watering hole for a drink. One of the beauties of the Musikese camp is that they have a small aluminum skiff with an outboard motor, and they can take you on safari on the Kafue River, which is a huge and magnificent river that runs through the national park. Very big river, a tributary of the Zambezi. And we could cruise along in the boat at very slow speed and see these wonderful riverside shore scenes like the photos show here. And of course there were animals residing along the banks of the river, like this hippo mom and her little one. And they sometimes were a little bit spooked by the, but when the hippos get spooked, they just head for the water, and that's their security. And they don't have to be too spooked as far as I'm concerned, because I would not want to get close to this big bull. Um, I was reminded by our guide several times not to extend limbs beyond the edges of the boat, and I was also reminded several times not to go more closer edge than 2 meters, 10 feet roughly. And here's the reason why. And there are crocodiles all over in the Kafue River, crocodiles all over in the Luangwa River, which we also spent some time at. And they are deadly. They take a lot of wildlife, occasional human lives. And the interesting thing is, if you boat along this magnificent river, you'll see almost no people, no fishermen, no development on the shores. And of course, part of that is because we're in a national park, but two is because you don't just want to idle on the shore of the Kafue River, or you might wind up unexpected company chasing you. A lot of birds along the river. This is a giant kingfisher. And they truly are giant. Look at the bill on that guy. And this same giant kingfisher took on a pretty good sized fish here. And I can't identify the species, but it was definitely a fighting fish. And the king tried to fight her too. He lost this particular battle. We saw African darters perch any of the pieces of driftwood and that were extending out over the water along the river. Beautiful bird. I'll probably say beautiful bird 50 times this evening, but there are some real stunners in Zambia, like malachite kingfisher, also along the Kafue River. And the open stork, pretty common fella, big guy that likes to frequent water areas, rivers and wetlands. It's a much less common bird. It's a Goliath heron, largest heron in the world, as I understand it. And as you can see here, we were on an evening safari. The sun was just going down, and I caught sight of this fella tucked behind a tree there and managed to snap a picture while I still had a little bit of light left. This is a pied kingfisher, and they're, despite being fisher, they actually get a lot of their food from land areas, and they get small insects and various other small critters from the ground. At this point, we left Musikese and headed toward our third safari, of course, was Zakomo. And this is just some of what we saw along the way. This is Zakomo, and you can see the quarters there. These are individual bungalows or cottages, and pretty much the same arrangement. Perfectly self-contained, take meals in a common area, and you get the hot showers via bucket, and they have a little bit of wireless service. That's what the big tower is, and internet service. That's what the big tower there is in the middle of in the compound. And these are the owners and managers of Zakomo Safari, Victoria and David Wallace. Become good friends with them and correspond with them frequently. And this is our extraordinary guide at Zakomo, Julius Banda. Julius was an amazing guy. Frankly, the first day or two we went on safari with him, I was kind of frustrated because he would drive past what I thought was a truly wonderful photo opportunity, and he'd say, okay, we won't stop here, we'll go a couple of hundred more feet, and we'll have better light, and we'll get a better angle on this line, whatever it was. And he said, you'll move over there, and you'll have better opportunity. And I'd say, well, okay. And of course, Julius was always right. It was a better photo opportunity. He made sure that the sun was behind us and things like that. He knew every bird and every animal there. And the guides, incidentally, in Zambia generally are renowned throughout Africa for being very knowledgeable. Again, we didn't suffer from any want of food as Zakomo. We had excellent meals. This is a typical service outdoors, of course, under shade for our meal at Zakomo. This was a neighbor of ours, Giacomo. He was about 30 feet from our front door one morning when we looked out. And I don't know if this is the same giraffe or not, but here he's using that long neck to browse a tree near camp. And the camp is very close to, it nestled right against the wetland. And we had birds in the front yard all the time. Typically beautiful things like the spur-winged goose or African spoonbill, red-billed firefinch. I think I shot this while I was sitting in my chair eating lunch, and of course I had my camera with me practically everywhere I went. And this is Rhodesian or thorny-crofts giraffe, and there are several subspecies in Africa, and this one is distinguished by irregular shape of the spots, the brown spots on its skin. And this was a, this was a mother and a little guy. And the giraffes had about an 8-foot neck, and then they have an 18-inch tongue. So they can get way up into the upper foliage of big trees that most other animals can't get. I think the elephants might be able to outcompete them, I'm not sure. But this is a sausage tree, and you can see the fruit there and understand why it's called that. The African wild dog, beautiful animal that I had never seen before. And there are some small packs near Giacomo. This happened to be a pack, I think it had 10 individuals in it. And they typically are relaxing in the daytime and hunting at night. And they do hunt as a pack. They're very, very social animals. And they apparently are able to communicate with each other and even coordinate their hunts before they take off to run down an antelope or whatever the prey is going to be that evening. And they communicate through, as I understand it, a sound that is much like sneezing. And I assure you I don't know the wild dog language, and I didn't hear any of them sneeze, but it's an interesting way to carry on a conversation. And you'll notice a radio collar on one animal here, the one lying down in the foreground. There are various conservation organizations, government agencies in Zambia that do carry out research on the animals. And of course, radio tracking is one way they do that. This is a bird of Zambia, the African fish eagle. There's a lot of these, very common fellow, likes to hang out in the foliage wetlands. And these areas flood in the rainy season and then start to dry up in the dry season, or in the language spoken there, the local language, are called dambos. And as I mentioned before, when the water supply shrinks and zombos start to dry up, then more and more critters get crowded in a smaller area. There's another African spoonbill. And here we're going to get into some more birds. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is a leopard during a night safari. The guides are very careful not to shine lights directly into the eyes of the animals they see, because they don't want to cause the animal to temporarily lose their night vision. We also went on evening safaris, night safaris, and saw high. And before I went to Zambia, I certainly had a fairly low opinion of hyenas. I thought of them as sort of bloodthirsty animals with rather evil-looking eyes. More fond of them after we spent some time near a den at Giacomo. And here we got to see the mother and her cubs, and very, very attentive mother, very gentle with her little ones. And of course, cubs look like little puppies, and yourself going, aw. This is a genet. It's a nocturnal animal. It's cat-like, but it is not actually a feline. And this is a vervet, a very common monkey. I was doing a bit of research on vervets, and I came across a quote that I'll read you here. The entry said, vervets, quote, are noted for having human-like characteristics such as hypertension, anxiety, and social and dependent alcohol use, end quote. I have a lot of questions about that. I'll ask them here, but I suppose that may explain this. Red-billed quelea, a common bird. They organize in vast flocks, fly around from one area to another in clouds, essentially, somewhat like starlings do here. This is a dombo. Surprised not to see more birds out here, but beautiful area. And now we're seeing some yellow-billed storks enjoying the cool waters of the dombo. And I keep talking about the birds. I'm going to withdraw that adjective for this particular one. The marabou stork is not exactly a handsome fellow in my estimation, but he is very formidable looking. And you have to remember when you're around those dombos that there are creatures in the water and under the water that you can't see, like this crocodile. This guy is a little easier to see. And it's great fun to watch the elephants play in the water and mud. They are so enthusiastic about getting a midday bath when the sun starts to get high in the sky. And this fellow went all in. Again, the parents very protective of the little guys. You can pretty much tell the depth of the water in any nearby dombo or river crossing or anything by just looking at the watermarks on the elephants. This was a small creek crossing, I guess you'd call it. We didn't have any problem navigating it with our off-road vehicles, but it would be totally impassable in winter. And this is a greater coot, I believe, out in the open. And a puku, a small antelope, very common, particularly in Kafue, but so in South Luangwa National Park. And a lot of elephants throughout Zambia. Again, those magnificent trees. And here's an elephant browsing an acacia tree. You can see those thorns, but it doesn't seem to stop. This is Louann's favorite bird, the lilac-breasted roller. She continually tried to get me to get a picture of one in flight, and I'm sorry, dear, I never succeeded. This is my favorite among the many birds, I think. Well, I have many favorites, actually, but I love the clown-like look on the face of this little Lillian's lovebird. And of course, many of the birds I'd never even heard of before. This is a hooded vulture, hornbill. Again, another gray-crowned crane. Can't stop taking pictures of these guys. Red-billed hornbill. Saw quite a few of these. I had to get in touch with some of the folks at Zacomo after I got home to figure out what this one was, but they assured me it's an African harrier hawk. This is a fairly rare bird, apparently. I didn't realize that either until we got home. I thought it was just a white-fronted bee-eater, but then I saw those two long tail feathers and did some research on it. Turns out it's a Boehm's bee-eater, or Bame's bee-eater. And the material that I was reading said there'd only been 2 recent records of them in Zambia, so we were very lucky. A pair of southern ground hornbills with the young one. The saddle-billed stork, which is just an amazing looking bird. And the Nile monitor lizard is pretty common around the Dombos, and also we saw a lot of these on the Kapue River. This is a three-shot sequence here of elephants crossing the river, and you'll note that they kind of group themselves around the little ones that you can make out there in the group on the right, and that's to, of course, to protect the little ones and help them ford the river. The water gets deeper, and at some point, little ones are entirely under the water. I don't know if they're holding breath or if they're snorkeling using their trunks, but here you can see them splashing out of the water, and you can see they're totally covered from having been submerged. There's a reason the elephants work to protect the little ones when they cross the river, and that's the reason. There's a Nile crocodile. He probably is about 15 to 16 feet long. They get bigger than that, and he probably weighs somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 pounds, and they will go after elephants. The crocodiles are just quite common along the Luangwa River, hundreds and hundreds of times. We would often hear people in Africa say, the crocodile is the most dangerous animal, or the Cape or the African buffalo is the most dangerous animal, or the I don't know, lion is the most dangerous animal, or the hippo. I never did hear that argument get said. You can see this guy has been in a fight. He has some scars back by his rear leg. A gentle soul is this big fella. With the hitchhikers, they always have a bunch of red-billed oxpeckers they're carrying around with them. It's a parasitic relationship, of course, and the oxpeckers pick the bugs and parasites from the giraffe. This pair almost caused a heart attack on our trip. We had driven up close to a pride of lion late in the morning, and the pride apparently had a kill, and they were all lying in the shade with small trees and brush nearby. And our guide, of course, was very careful not to disturb them, but we got fairly close to them with the video. And then this mother giraffe and her one showed up, and the guide said, you know, she's very curious, giraffes are very curious, and she's going to want to go over and look at these lions. And of course, lions prey on giraffes, and I particularly like the young giraffes that by kicking them. The big ones are dangerous to lions. And we didn't think having Mama go over and check the lions was really very smart, but she did, and left the young one standing and wandered over near the pride of lions, looked them over, and seemed to say to herself, yeah, those are lions. And she went back to the youngster. And the guide said, well, she's probably going to make another visit. He said they often will come back and check 2 or 3 times. And sure enough, the mother giraffe turned around, left the young one behind, and wandered back over near the lions and looked them over, and finally seemed to say to herself, those really are lions. And we were fearful that the lions would rouse from their slumbers and run down that little giraffe, but knew what they were doing. They did leave without being attacked. This is a white-headed vulture trying to share a kill that was made by the tawny eagle. And the white-headed vulture actually did take the kill away from it. It flew off with just a small portion of its prey. This was a pride of lions that ran down a kudu near Zakomo, and after the lions had their fill and went to rest in the shade, then the vultures and the hyenas came in. And again, the ever-present warthogs. And we had great fun watching boar play in the mud when it was getting warm, and he would come down to the water and the mud roll around in it, and he'd run out and sort of dry himself off and wipe the mud off on the grass and on the edge of the bank you see there. And then a minute later, he'd go back into the water, and you could just see pure joy on his face. His African buffalo we came upon when we were on a walking safari. I was somewhat surprised when our guide suggested that we get fairly close to them, because this was one of the animals that are supposed to be very dangerous. We did as the guide suggested, and there was no problem. And the buffalo seemed undisturbed by our presence. And we're back to some Grant's zebras here. And beautiful southern bee eaters. Another roller. And some Lillian's lovebirds. These were quite common in Zacomo camp, and had them near the dining table. African jasana. When I first saw that word, I thought somehow it might be Spanish, and I was thinking it would be pronounced Hakana or Hasana, but it is jasana according to reading. And here we have a Lillian's bird, and once again, and it said it all. So it was with our Zambia adventure. And after 3 weeks of spectacular safari to Zambia's capital, Lusaka, and began our long flight home via Ethiopian Airlines. It had indeed been a lifetime for us, and our memories of it will remain vivid as the colors of a lilac-breasted roller or African sunset. And thank you all very much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or at least try through the chat process. I just want you to remember, I'm no expert on Zambian zoology, but I'm just a guy who was lucky enough to visit a beautiful place that abounds with some stunning wildlife. Thank you again very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mitch. We do have some questions for you. The first one from Eugenia: what made you choose to go to Zambia out of all the places in Africa?
We had long contemplated going to Africa, and had been planning on doing that for several years. And we just, for various reasons, we weren't able to leave at the times we had been thinking of. And we were very uncertain about what countries we wanted to go. And Kenya, Tanzania, and Botswana are probably the big three for the most tourists to Africa. I see, excuse me, I had not started my video.
Oh, there we go.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We had been planning a trip to Africa for a long time and just couldn't pull it together. And we got into communication with a long friend of Louann's that she and her husband had set up a camp at Zacomo, and they had been asking us for a couple of years to go to Zambia, you'll love it. And so we finally started doing more and more research, and we had set up a trip that would have gone through overseas adventure tour through 3 countries, Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And we bailed out on that trip because Zimbabwe's just collapsed, and they were having a lot of political troubles, and we just didn't think it was safe to go to Zimbabwe. So we canceled that trip and set up another one, had to change that one around, and eventually just zeroed in on Zambia. And I'm very glad we did. I'm sure there's much to see in those other countries that I mentioned. but we couldn't have been happier with the wildlife and the treatment that we got in Zambia. And I would certainly go back there in a heartbeat. If I could fly, of course.
Second. Question was, what does a safari like this cost?
Well, it depends on of course, on what level of travel you want to take. If you want high end, it can be very expensive. If you want to economize, you can go to some of the less luxurious camps. And at some camps, you can even camp. You can pitch a tent that you get from the camp and take your meals at their central dining area, and then stay in your tent. And the camp will charge you for day trips in vehicles at your bidding. You can take one safari trip in a four-wheel drive, or you can take a dozen of them, depending on how much you're willing to pay. I would say it's certainly a trip that would cost several tens of thousands of dollars, no matter what you do. It's not a cheap trip.
Okay.
Shumba, the camp, the first we were at was by far the most expensive one. We were only there for, let's see, it was either 3 or 4 nights. Musake, the second one where we had the lion in the front yard, that was about half the price of Shumba, and Zakomo was in that price range too. I would describe Shumba top end and Musake and Zakomo as mid-range prices. One thing I would say too about the various countries is we get a lot of rumors and stories about crowding in Kenya and Tanzania and even Botswana. That you know, there'd be a pride of lions, and 10 Land Rovers would descend on it, each one full of 6 tourists and a guide. We saw nothing of that. Many of the times we were on safari, we had the two of us in the vehicle and a guide, and occasionally we'd have 2 or 3 other people in the vehicle with us. I think we were in 2 or 3 places where we had a few other vehicles gather around us. Most of the time, no other vehicles.
Okay, and what months did you take this trip in?
We left in late July, and we returned in late August. Yeah, one of the things you have to allow for travel to Africa is essentially you have to allow 3 days on either end of the trip for your travel. It's many, many thousands of miles. We'll be in an aircraft, and inside the aircraft, something like 30 hours probably, could be as many as 35. And so you take 3 days at the front, 3 days at the back, 6 days of the trip or travel. Traveling in Zambia, that was not too difficult. English is the language, and so we didn't have too much problem communicating. And the people at the camps, of course, are very, very working with the visitors to make sure they make all their things. And I should give a shout out here to Tembo Tours, that wonderful organization based in Lusaka, capital of Zambia. And Leslie's Nebazon is the manager, and I think the owner. She worked very closely with us to make our arrangements so we could get from, say, Lusaka Airport to the place where we're supposed to be, to the safari vehicle that would take us to a camp or something like that. So we did use a local tourism agent.
Okay, next question. Tim asked, did you see any birds in Africa that we also have here in the U.S.?
Not one that I can think of. The gray heron that I mentioned earlier in the presentation was quite similar to the great blue heron, a little bit smaller, a little different color. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a single bird that I saw that was here in the U.S.
Okay, and then Eugenia asked, what type of camera do you use and how strong are the lenses, the zoom lenses?
I took a single camera body. It's a AR7 III. It's a fairly recent model of Sony mirrorless camera. It's about 2 years old. And then I carried two lenses, a wide angle and the zoom telephoto, mid telephoto that you saw in one of the early pictures. That's a 100 to 400 millimeter zoom. And that's excellent. I couldn't have been happier with that arrangement. There's a tendency to say that you want to take your biggest telephoto. Of course, that would be handy for the birds, but again, you have to travel. You have to worry about knocking around a big telephoto in a four-wheel drive rig where you might have several other passengers. You know, the guides are gentle drivers, but it's a pretty rough road, and there's not a lot of room with all of the supports for the shade on the vehicle to be swinging around a 600 millimeter telephoto. I had one, I did not take it, I don't regret it.
Okay, and let's see here. We have anonymous attendee. Do the bee-eater birds eat bees as their primary diet? Their names suggest they do.
Oh, I wish I could answer that question. I honestly don't know. I never thought to ask our guide. Undoubtedly would have given me a correct, detailed answer, but I did not think to ask the question. Sorry.
Okay, and then let's see, we have a couple of comments here that possibly a great egret could be seen there and a black crowned night heron could be seen in Africa.
We did not, and I would have recognized that because that is a bird that that we've seen both in Oregon and in Hawaii. But I did, unless there was one lurking in one of my photos that I didn't spot, I did not see any when we were in Zambia.
Okay, and then Paul asks, what is the political situation in Zambia?
Yeah, excellent point. Zambia is quite stable politically, and after independence, a lot of the newly independent African nations went through a lot of turmoil and political unrest, and the economies in some of the countries struggled. Zambia did very well and exited the British colonial system pretty gracefully. It remains what I would call a fairly poor country, but it is stable. We felt quite safe there, quite secure the entire trip. We never stayed in Lusaka, the capital, and went out on the streets at night or anything like that. We just weren't there in the big city to get much feel for it, but I felt pretty comfortable in Zambia. I don't mean to badmouth the neighboring country of Zimbabwe, but we crossed over into Zimbabwe for a day to get a better view of the and learn a little bit about that country. And I was not comfortable during the time I was there, although we had an excellent guide and nothing untoward happened. I was just, itself was undergoing unrest, and I was just afraid that somehow we might get caught up on the wrong side of the border when there was rioting in the streets or something going on that would keep us from getting back into Zambia.
Okay, and in answer to the question on the bee-eater, as their name suggests, bee-eaters predominantly eat flying insects, especially bees and wasps, which are caught on the wing from an open perch. The stinger is removed by repeatedly hitting and rubbing the insect on a hard surface.
Oh,
very interesting.
Hey, look at that.
There's 27 species of bee-eaters.
Yes, yes.
So are there any other questions
version.
for Mitch?
Sorry, did I miss a question there?
Oh, no, I was just asking if there's any other questions for Mitch.
Oh, okay.
Okay, gone, and I'll turn it back over to Eugenia.
Very good. Thank you again all very much.
Okay. Did you miss everything I said?
Yes, so go ahead.
Okay, it's successfully unmuted. I guess I can't do it just from this. I have to do it in concert with Michael.
Right.
Thanks very much for a wonderful presentation, Mitch. And thanks for all you've gone through to figure out how to do it in this new mode. And I think it went beautifully.
Great. Thank you very much. Good coaching.
Tim and Mike have been working on this all summer, and they're doing an excellent job of bringing the rest of us along.
Well, and I must say, delving back to photos of the Zambia trip is not hard by any means. I enjoyed the presentation, putting together the presentation.
And how many Zambia photos did you have, did you say?
8,000.
That was rather a lot to go through, I imagine.
Yes. Well, and I frequently shoot in burst mode. So, you know, if the animal's moving, I'm knocking out 4 or 5 pictures of it in a second.
Okay, well, thank you. Maybe you'll stay and share your local sightings with us. We are going to have our traditional sharing session of talking about local sightings and trips that people have been taking. We go, not everybody stays, although I hope that many of you will. And Mike is going to then promote everybody who has simply been considered a participant and had been muted. If they have a microphone, they will now be capable of speaking and being heard. Anybody who does not have a microphone can continue to use the chat function to put in questions, comments, and to give us your observations when it's your time to share. So we are going to take a break of probably 3 or 4 minutes while those who wish to leave press their leave button wherever it is on your screen and sign out. And those people who remain signed in will be part of our sharing session in just a few minutes. Over to you, Mike and Tim, while you get that figured out.
Okay. I think I've got everybody turned over to be a panelist. So.
Already.
Yep.
Okay.
And there's 14 people left so far.
Now, the question is, how are we going to know who's there?
By just clicking on the panelist list, and we can see who's there. Several people have the same.
Click on the gallery, the gallery view, and you'll see everybody's tile come up.
I am on the gallery view.
Oh, okay.
I'm just
you don't see the
I'm
names?
beginning. I see Jeff Harding. I see tiles for John Matthews, Pat Tilley, Pat Gallagher.
You might have to click on the little square up above there. There's a little square with a bunch of dots in them, or like if you.
Yeah, well, that's what I had before, and that only shows 4 at a time.
Well, I've got all 11 people.
Yeah, I do too.
Oh, it's the. No, that just. Okay, well. I don't want to leave anyone out.
Yeah, no, everybody's here that has stayed.
Paul Evans, are you there?
No, but Michael Babbitt is.
Okay, I was wondering, I was thinking that was you, Michael, because I was going to ask Paul Evans for his report. I know he was there earlier.
Oh,
Well, I
yeah,
don't know that he was. Actually, there was 5 people who had Paul Evans on their name. One of them was
Oh, no.
Cynthia. One of them was Michael. I don't know that there was any Paul Evans with us. Really, I mean, real Paul Evans.
Yeah,
Although,
there was.
was
Yes.
there one?
Was he put in a report on the bird walk, and I wanted to have him give it to us.
You sure that wasn't Cynthia?
Cynthia, are you there?
She was under Paul Evans.
Oh, she may have done that.
Yeah, I was doing that earlier because I had asked a question which was attributed to Paul.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
But we got your name right on you now. Michael, would you like to start off sharing? Oh, I should have done it the proper way, but for those of you who are familiar with it and those of you who are not, we give our name. My name is Eugenia Becker, and I live in West Salem. And basically, I don't have a big report to make, but to start things off, before Michael gets his chance, I'm just going to talk about a fun experience I had recently. Haven't been out traveling, but of course, as always, the birds in the backyard, and I have the usual big flock of bush tits at my suet, but they also roost in a very heavily leafed 15-foot maple tree in our front yard. And I was out at about 6:30 in the morning several weeks ago when the sun had just come up, the mist was rising, and suddenly this very quiet maple tree was exploding with bush tits popping up, not moving their wings at first and then flopping their wings. It looked almost like a bunch of fleas rising on a dog, but much prettier, of course. And it was just exciting to see this flock all emerging simultaneously like little bouncing balls from the maple tree. Now, Michael, do you have something to share with us?
Well, a few things. I've been working from home since March with COVID. And are you all able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
At any rate, so that's been kind of interesting. It started when there was a fair amount of migration going on. So I was able to see quite a few, just nothing extraordinarily different, but a number of birds here, a lot more than I have been seeing lately. One of the interesting things I saw was that a couple times I would see mourning doves and European collared doves out kind of hanging out together. And I could compare them. That was kind of interesting. And then more recently, I was camping, spending the night doing an overnight hike up near Hoodoo, a little bit south of Hoodoo. And I was sleeping out and there was an owl. It was either probably a barred owl or maybe a great horned owl. I couldn't tell. It was at night, but it just kept flying around almost like it was watching me. It's kind of strange. From one side, then to the other side, and I could swear it was watching me. And then I heard, it sounded like it caught something. I heard something squeak, like maybe a rabbit's final call. I don't know. And then this last weekend, I was out kayaking on the Willamette. Kathleen and I were, and with some friends. And, it's a lot of the usual kind of birds you see on the river. Saw osprey and kingfisher. I think I saw a green heron. A number of great blue herons, and of course the bald eagles, and sometimes they were being harassed by osprey. But I saw a little bit of it was kind of different was I guess it's sort of nationalistic bird watching. I kind of caught the tail end of it, but a bald eagle came down on the river and caught a fish. And it was kind of interesting to see, but I was quite a ways from it and caught the tail end of it. And some other folks I was with saw more of it, but some people that were close by another group of kayakers, they must have been about 50 feet away from this spectacle. And they saw it and they got excited and heard them yelling, and some of them started shouting, USA, USA, which was the strangest thing to be calling in birding, but that's what I saw. And it was, so anyway, so that's my report. Thank you.
Was that eagle in the water?
No, it came down from the surface and caught the fish and then went up kind of the same way an osprey would do it.
I watched one land in Willamette Slough the other day, and really surprised me because the eagle went all in like he was playing osprey. And he stayed in the water for about 30 seconds before he lifted off.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, this one it seemed like it went down. Of course, like I said, I caught the tail end of it, but I think the eagle was only at the water surface for a few seconds and got up with the fish.
I'm sure we can. You can try.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Well, now look here.
You're on.
Okay,
Okay.
The next person I have
it
is
did come on,
What are you trying to do?
and there I am. Oh, there you go.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Your audio in?
Okay. The next person I see is Pat Gallagher, although I don't see him, but I see his name. Pat, are you there?
You should have audio. You want that on?
I don't know that he has a mic because I don't see the option to ask him to turn his mic
Okay.
on. Tim Johnson, the icon you see Tim Johnson there is really
Yeah.
Kathy Patterson. And she
Okay,
was
Kathy, are you
hoping,
there?
to join us, but has been having difficulty getting her iPad connected.
Okay, is somebody bringing up pictures to show?
Yeah, Jeff was.
Jeff Harding.
Yeah, I brought up a picture. I'm sorry if I interrupted, but
I'm not sure what's going on, so I don't know if you interrupted something or
well,
not.
I didn't know what would happen if I just shared this screen. This was a Western tanager that Tim and I saw at Ankeny the other day.
Ah,
I thought that was worth sharing. Just popped up for a moment in an unusual habitat.
Boy, yeah.
that is.
So coincidentally, today I get an email from Teresa with a photograph of a female Western tanager in her yard. So maybe there's a wave of them coming through.
Yeah, I have a couple of them in my yard also.
Interesting.
John, is that John?
Yeah, that's John.
Yeah.
That's great, Jeff. And we've been talking about how can we have people share their photos at this. Can you briefly describe how you did that?
There's a little icon says share screen, and when you click on it, it gives a list of all the things that I have open. And then I clicked on the where I have this photo, and there it came.
Wonderful.
At this point, if I wanted to, I could scroll through some of the other photographs I took at Ankeny, but they aren't very good compared to what we saw from Mitch. So, you know, what's the point?
Don't let
But this
that
is a
stop you.
spectral sandpiper. You know, sandpiper. Here's a lesser yellowlegs was going around with there's contrast, and this is like, you know, Mitch takes thousands of photographs or hundreds at a time, and this is just my raw roll here where I just scroll through, but you can see the bill length comparison on the lesser yellow legs there. So anyway, that's what I did.